Assalamu alaikum. I'm Imam Dai Abdallah, the director of LGBT Outreach Program at Muslims for Progressive Values. In this video, we're going to talk about our understanding of the spectrum of gender and sexual identity in conjunction with mental health. Islam has been influenced by many different cultures at different times. When it comes to our understanding of gender and sexual identity, Islam has been directly influenced by three cultures: the Arab, in which it was born, the Persian, in which it grew in the Golden Age, and the Turkish, which was the dominating culture in the Ottoman Empire. The influences of these cultures came in different ways, and their long-term effects are definitely something we can feel today. During the 7th century, Muslim theologians, religious scholars, and jurists carried out significant discussions and debates regarding sexual minorities within Islamic and newly conquered societies. Quite often, discussions about sexual minorities which center around gender ambiguities, for example, the inability to tell the difference between a male and female by physical appearance. Due to the Islamic law structure of inheritance, Islamic law demanded each individual must fit into the male-female binary construct in order for them to receive their proper share of inheritance. Without such distinction, an individual may not receive their just share of their inheritance. For example, there are many texts that discuss the legal debates regarding hermaphrodites, the variation on their types, and how this gender ambiguity would cause disruption because inheritance was a given right to each individual. On a more social level, such androgyny was considered an invitation to disrupt social order based upon the male-female binary. This particular issue has been with us throughout most of Islamic history. However, surgical operations were done as early as the 8th century to force a child's body to fit this binary. According to some scholars, there are clear and specific individuals who fit into a particular gender that we can point to. There were the male, female, hermaphrodite, intersex, transgendered, and eunuch. This tells us that in the 7th century, Islam had diverse gender identities. Now, we have to keep in mind that the life of the Prophet was very much limited to the Arab society. After his death, his successors, or what some people would call our four rightly guided caliphs, there were new cultures coming into the faith, one by one, who had their own understanding of gender and sexual identities. These new cultures, such as Egypt or Syria or Persia, would then require the same kind of compromise that Christianity had with the Roman culture or the Greek culture. These types of compromises, which presented themselves in the fashion of revising the rules in the religion and would later on be attributed to the Prophet in the Hadiths, would definitely influence the religious viewpoints on gender and sexual identities. On the other hand, we know from the histories of other peoples that some of these things were from these other cultures rather than the culture of the Prophet. In the Islamic Golden Age, we had diverse groups of people coming together and with power. For example, when al-Alamin, the son of Harun al-Rashid, was overthrown by his half-brother, what a lot of people do not understand is that the overthrow came from the Persians, because al-Alamin was Arab royal-blooded on both sides. His parents were cousins. On the other hand, his half-brother had a mother who was Persian. And, of course, then, it is not a surprise that under such a half-Persian caliph did Bukhari, who was Persian, started collecting hadiths that were more of the Persian cultures in terms of gender than the Arabs. Bukhari finished his hadith collection during another half-Persian caliph, meaning his Persian-influenced collection of hadiths were not disputed. This is because it was seen as a compromise between the cultures, because he attributed to Arab personalities. So, you had gender viewpoints from the Persian culture attributed to Arab personalities. This was Islam. Of course, Harun al-Rashid left his reign to his full Arab-blooded son because he knew the type of culture he was accustomed to, the type of friends that he had, and the world that he lived in would be compromised. That was the Islamic Golden Age. It was a time of rivalry of cultures because everybody wanted to be on the golden pages. The fear of these Arabs was based on the fact that the Persian culture of thousands of years of history on paper and oral history was celebrated in other cultures. In modern times, as the Ottoman Empire came into being, issues concerning human sexuality were under discussion in secular societies, and the decriminalization of homosexuality in Muslim lands provided space for sexual minorities. However, such freedom under the law was short-lived. The act of the Ottomans refusing Muslim societies the right to print and distribute led to a period of influence, since the state could make such influence in its own choosing. This allowed the Ottomans a chance to subdue some of the less secular-minded cultures to conform to their ways. Later, as we know, as colonialism established foreign laws that criminalized homosexuality and sodomy within Muslim lands, when certain Muslim states arose, the new Muslim leaders utilized these laws as a tool to maintain control over the masses. In places like Iran, in 1983, the government began a social revolution by allowing individuals to seek counseling through the goal of sexual identity realignment. This has had some success, but it also has had many failures due to the criteria that has been used in determining sex identity reassignment. In more recent times, the Islamic concept of sexuality has been discussed by women and sexual minority scholars who have analyzed and deconstructed the patriarchal binary system and challenging the hierarchical understanding of patriarchy with God, followed by males, and then in some instances females and sexual minorities below. In the 21st century, Islamic scholarship is questioning this male and female binary, and by rereading and reinterpreting the Quran, continue to expand the thinking and understanding of human sexuality. Such limitations makes it nearly impossible for this binary structure to stand, much less identify with, and inculcate the full spectrum of sexual minorities. Today, the use of chromosome studies are utilized to distinguish whether the child is a male or a female. Thus, we have examples of how far-fetched the religious and Sharia standards remain intrusive, while attempting to change how a person was created at birth. In conclusion, Islam, just like any other faith, had a lot to consider when it came to gender and sexual identities. This is simply because such faiths have to worry about their own history in conjunction with the cultures around them. This is why we see Islam having different points of view about gender and sexual identities in the various histories of the faith, especially the 7th century, Golden Age, and the Ottoman Empire, which were mostly influenced by Arabs, Persians, and Turks, because these three cultures have had their own thousands of years of history.